Hello, welcome to an episode of XenoChat. I am one of the hosts, Tyler, along with Justin.
What's up, everyone?
Alright, we got a few, several returning faces with us today, or voices, rather. First up, we have Kat.
Oh, hi.
And Jessi.
Hello.
Nick.
Nick.
Hold on, I'm pouring a drink.
Oh my god.
Alright, then skip him. Well,
Okay.
Nick is here.
No, that's
pouring
my
a
intro.
drink.
Nick is
That's my intro. I was trying to spice it up. Come on.
Oh my gosh. Alright, and after
my drink.
and after a long hiatus from the show, we have Pure returning. Welcome back, Pure.
Hello, my name is Pure, and once again, I'll be your Xeno villain for the day.
I'll say you act like this wasn't your idea of an episode, but
Well,
we did not put him up to this.
well, you know, I was doing you a favor, and
Sure.
I might have an ulterior motive. I might have an announcement at the end of this episode, and I'll leave it at
Ooh. Okay, well, the theme of this episode, that we've been slightly alluding to, is the Xeno fandom over the years, because, I mean, fandom is a very tricky subject, but the Xeno fandom is interesting because it's gone through a lot over the past 20 years plus, with different forums and different groups sprouting up. So we're going to kind of delve into that and our own personal experiences with the fandom over the years.
I feel like this episode obviously comes with a big disclaimer of, please don't get too mad.
Please don't get too mad.
I mean, we're going to try to talk about the
We're gonna
positives,
keep it light.
the positives of
Yeah, we're
fandom,
gonna-
because a lot of people might think of some negatives here and there, but there have been some really good moments to pop out from fandom, and that's what we're mostly here for. Like,
Yeah, I'm
Mostly.
anyway, so.
Yeah.
no worries.
yeah. So I guess to start it off, let's kind of go around and kind of discuss a little briefly, like, your own interactions with or participation with the Xeno fandom. Who wants to go first?
I can go first since mine's probably the easiest.
Okay.
Alright, so I think I've mentioned it before, but I really haven't engaged with the Xeno fandom or really many fandoms in general before the podcast. So compared to a lot of people, at least, it feels like I played these games in hiding. Like, I played them, but I just never really felt the need to go on the internet and to seek out a bunch of people who also played it and discuss with them and talk about stuff and fanfic and all that stuff. I don't know. I guess, like, growing up, I just was kind of just like, I'll just play this and enjoy it. I don't really see the point in doing it. But, of course, later on, I would, I'd be part of Operation Rainfall. So that's when I started to become a little bit more involved in communities, and then we're doing a podcast, so obviously, at this point, I'm sounding like a fucking, like, prick right now. Look at me, I got a podcast, so now I'm important in general. No, I'm not important. I am the least important person in the community. But yes, it would be till the podcast that I would actually, like, start to make some sort of content for Xeno, and, like, it's been cool. Like, I've met some fun people. I've also had plenty of bad experiences browsing Twitter, which has led to me blocking a lot more people than I would care to admit. But, otherwise, I think I am happy that I've met the people that I met, because they've been pretty cool to me, and I've had some fun experiences, so it's not all bad.
Oh.
Fandom is very much what you make of it. That's the way I see it. Like, you can either go in there, you can make it a good experience, you could find some people that you really gel with, and you can hopefully use it to explore yourself and discover some new stuff about you too.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could just be an asshole and bring in all of your own personal issues and poison the wells for everybody. You could absolutely do that too.
Wow,
What?
Justin.
So
Just
much
this,
spice.
they were thinking I was going to be the passive aggressive one on this podcast. I'm supposed to be the villain.
I'm not.
Taking my thunder right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the villain this episode. I got the
Every
double
good
horse
show
going.
needs a heel.
But yeah, like I said, it is very much
Do that.
what you make of it, and I think people need to remember that communities are made of people. So you want the community to be good, then do good. All right.
Okay. All right. How about you go, Nick? Since you're somewhat a fresher fan, somewhat.
I might be the honestly, I might be the freshest one here, like in a way, because like I had played my first game was Xenoblade, the first one. Like I played it back around the time it came out, just because I was curious, because like, oh, it's set on two giant dead god titan things, and I thought that was cool, and I'm all about like the places you explore in games anyway, so that like kind of got me in the first place. But you know, I never really got involved with the fandom. I just kind of, at first, for like a long time, I met some friends in real life, believe it or not, that they talked about how they used to be really big into like the Xenosaga fandom, especially, and I don't know, I was like remotely curious. They weren't. Some of them were fans still. Some of them weren't so much anymore. But long story short, I met our friend HK here, Marie, and she kind of got me involved more with this fandom, and like I was really enjoying all the games I was playing, so I went back and played a lot of the older games and got all caught up and stuff, and you know, for what it's worth, I've enjoyed all of it. So that's part of why I'm here. Also, I just really like these people, you know. So that's like
Aww.
one of the
You
other
fool.
things. Yeah, I know. It was a terrible mistake.
How could you involve yourself with us? We're the worst.
You know, I think you should stick to tweeting about Mega Man, Justin.
Dang.
Nah, I kid. But no, yeah, I mean, I like our corner of the fandom. It's been pretty great. It's been a lot of fun to discuss these games with them. I have no regrets. So, I think I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay. Let's see. Well, I'll go next, because I know the others might have a deeper story than me. But yeah, I started on like forums, like I was on the IGN forums, and I was on Bot and Kaito's forums, but I was also talking about Xenosaga there for some reason. But my first like real forum was like Xeno Legacy, which I had a really good time, made a lot of good friends there, and went on to GodSib and whatnot, and Xeno Underground. And yeah, it's I mean, there are some low points to it too, which I admit some of it in the past I was very cringe. But I feel like I've gotten a little bit better since those days, I hope. Yeah, I would still like to yeah, the most I've been in it these days is with XenoChat, and I mostly, for Twitter, I look at really awesome fan art. There's some great fan art out there. But
Well, if I may interject, you say it's cringe. It's fearless, though. It's really just fearless. You didn't care. You didn't care what other people thought.
No cringe, only free.
no, there's some stuff back then that I wish I hadn't. But things are good for the most part nowadays. But I'm mostly surround myself with you guys, so that's what I like most these days. It's more chill experience, but it's still a good experience.
Sounds like CHiCO to me.
Yeah. Who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Okie doke.
All right. So for a while, like I started I'm old as dirt. I'm 41. So Xenogears came out when I was around 16 or 17. I didn't like there really wasn't a whole lot of like fandom-y communities and stuff that I really wanted to reach out to. In 1998/1999, all I did was fan art and fan fiction, and I wrote for myself, and I drew for myself, and I basically only really like Googled Xenogears fan art, and was lurking and looking at the works that other people did and drawing inspiration from them. Let's see. There was a website that I used to go to that is still up. It's called Guardian Angels, which centered around the elements, and those people who made those scans and translations like back in the day, so like became like, I don't want to say I idolized them, but I kind of did, because like some of their works just sort of like became enshrined in the back of my mind, because like I was a kid on the internet, and these people were older and smarter than me, so it was like, oh, this is so cool. I think by the time Xenosaga went around, I was poking around like. I was really just sort of like, because I like the wrong characters in every fandom ever, I was kind of remiss to join any kind of forum, but for some reason that fear got beaten back with Xenosaga, and I joined this little forum called Xeno Legacy, I think right before or right after Xenosaga 2 came out, and it was nice to have a little bit of community, and I made a couple of friends, but like, since I like the wrong characters, I ran into a lot of content that was like forum thread bashing your favorite character, and I really got sick of that, and it made me really discouraged to see that kind of content on the internet, because like I have depression already, and for a really long time I was just like a solo person, and one day, there was a message out on LiveJournal. Somebody wanted to make a Xenosaga website, because by the time that was it was Xenosaga 3 had come out, and I was tired of being like an unknown. And it turned out that person was Jessi, and together we helped stand up GodSib.net for like back in, was it 2009?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
According to Wayback Machine, the first time we actually got online was about 2009. I think we were talking in 2008 about it, though.
Yeah. And when we first stood up GodSib, I sort of like put out a message to my other people that I had been talking to, who sort of like knew me from DeviantArt or LiveJournal, or like, I don't want to say fanfiction.net, but it might have been fanfiction.net. So I tried to bring in as many people as I could to the forums for the first iteration of GodSib, and I think when I became a mod on GodSib, it was the first time I felt like a strong positive connection with the fandom, and it was a bright star in my sky for a really long time, and it saw me through a lot of like dark times, and I'm very grateful that it was there. And let's see, the other things that I ended up doing for GodSib was I was a moderator for a lot of the forum stuff. I did a lot of organization for the art that was cataloged there. I'm not a translator and I'm not an essay writer, but there was a lot of like fan-based initiatives. Like I don't exactly remember, but like I wanted to see people's fan art, and I wanted I wanted I wanted to encourage other people to post their work as well. And between GodSib's website and the group on DeviantArt and the group on Tumblr, it was a lot of positive energy. And I think once Tumblr got once the Tumblr era started, things started to fall apart. And I think GodSib 1.0 got hacked around that time. And when that happened, I had started Xeno Underground as sort of like an interstitial. But when I started Xeno Underground, I was kind of by myself for a bit, and what should have happened was I should have just archived the art and not tried to start another forum. But when I tried to start a forum for myself, it was essentially just me working on it, and I had just gotten a high stress job, and I didn't realize, but my stress would get worse and worse and worse. And I think around the time that stress got very bad, Xeno Underground's forums needed a lot more work than I could give them. So I went from self-hosting them to using an external forum called I even forget what I used. Hang on one second. Forum Motion. And Forum Motion was nice, but it didn't have a whole lot of features. A couple of very important people weren't impressed with Forum Motion, and unfortunately they decided not to continue for the community. And I think after a certain amount of time, the activity on Xeno Underground's forums became negative, and so I became discouraged in my own project, and I basically sort of because of that discouragement, I started to not want to continue the community, because it was basically I didn't want to discipline my own friends on a website that I ran. My interests, I wanted to be friends with everybody, and the thing about trying to be friends with everybody is that it's impossible. And so I was discouraged for a very long time, basically 2013 until 2020, which is, I think, when I reached out to the podcast for help. And Jessi was able to come back and make GodSib 2.0, I think after a very long stint of me sort of abandoning my own forum for Tumblr and then Twitter. And I think I just have felt old and outmoded for a really long time, and also I have so much stress at work, so I have to be an adult basically every day during the week, and having to deal with people's personalities and people's fights really just made me not want to do any of it at all anymore. But even when I was feeling this way, I didn't want to shut completely down, because I didn't want the amount of content that we'd accrued to disappear from the internet. So when I was reached out to Tyler and Justin to do the podcast, I was like, okay, maybe this will be alright. And I have had a really good time, but I realized that I can't run a community by myself. So that's when I reached out and asked for help, and we got Jessi back. We got everybody on the podcast. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people on the podcast have helped with GodSib 2.0, and now basically I'm kind of content to recede into the background. Xeno Underground is still a website that's up on the internet, but it's basically just an archive, and it was always sort of I hoped that it was just temporary kind of thing, and now that Godsend 2.0 is is up, that dream of me only being the temporary holder of the content, that the dream of Godsend coming back is now true, and I'm very happy with that. And I think now that I'm 41 and I'm realizing that I don't have the patience to run a community, because like the things that you need to run a community is that you need to have patience to deal with a lot of people who may or may not agree with each other, and you can't be everybody's friend. And I just really want to go back to doing my own work and having my own friends, and that is where I'm at right now.
Well, we appreciate you, and you definitely deserve the rest.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all too.
You're the best, Cat.
No, you're the best.
I'm really not, and I'm probably about to explain why. So I guess I'll go next. That sounds like a pretty good segue point.
Yeah.
So I was a very awkward homeschooled kid. And I had my hobby running anime graphics websites. So like forum signatures, avatars, wallpapers. I really liked graphic design. And I had been dabbling in like that community. And at some point I had met somebody and we had started an anime focused like fandom forum together. And a person on that forum taught me a lot of skills with PHP and like managing servers and all of the backend stuff that you need to like run a forum. And eventually I had taken over like a technical position there. But after, forums did what they do and there was drama over there, I had kind of stepped away from fandom for a while. And it was around that time, I want to say circa 2007, when my mom had gotten me Xenosaga 1, because it was on the discount, like, greatest hits for PlayStation 2 thing. And I played that. I immediately went out and bought Xenosaga 2, played that, I beat it. I enjoyed Xenosaga 2. I was hungry for more. And, like, immediately, like, sold a few games so I could buy Xenosaga 3. And it just, like, blew my mind. It was all I thought about. It was my new thing. It gave me life. And I am not exaggerating when I say that that game very much influenced my life and who I am today. But it was around that time when I was really hungering for, like, that sort of fandom interaction specifically. So I, like, tried to seek it out somewhat on forums like GameFAQs. I believe I did have accounts on Xeno Legacy, and a couple of other websites, but where I really, like, sort of felt more comfortable was the LiveJournal space. And, it was around that time that I had posted, like, hey, it would be really cool to make a more fandom-focused forum, website. So I actually, like, have this old Photoshop of, like, Margulis as a, Uncle Sam, being like, we want you to come and make contributions and to help out.
Still exists.
Ooh, I want to make that as the episode picture.
I had posted that, and I believe that that is the post Cat found, and they had expressed great interest in, wanting the same thing, and we started...
If I may interject just real fast here, whenever I searched, like, hearing about that stuff years later and trying to, like, dig up stuff, whenever I searched, like, I forget which of the forums it was, but that was one of the first images that came up, which was kind of hilarious.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was that recruitment image. It's still around.
Love it. It lives on. Anyway, we had spoken, and we started working on this forum. I had spent, I believe I was 15, 16 around that time, and I spent the whole summer going through the process of installing PHPBB, installing and using WordPress. I was already pretty familiar with WordPress and comfortable with it at the time, but doing things like the integrations and such, and man, it took off fairly fast, I remember. And it kept growing at a decent rate for 3 or 4 years. We had some great mods, we had some great people on there. I miss it a lot. I loved those times. Unfortunately, being a moody teenager, in the situation I was, being sort of homeschooled and trying to carve myself out into the world, I did not always... I kind of faded away and acted like a big jerk about it. I used to be a piece of shit. I'm not anymore. People can change.
Mm-hmm.
I still eat sloppy steaks.
I still eat them.
I don't care. Yeah,
Jump
I'm a
on.
piece of shit.
You get a steak and a glass of water. Anyway, I faded away for a while due to both personal things that had gone on with the forum and just wanting to carve out my identity in the world. And I should just plainly say it, I really just needed to go touch grass for the first time in my life. However, I also know that I pretty badly misbehaved, and I'm very sorry for that, Kat.
I mean, okay, from my perspective, I always hoped that you'd come back and we could be friends again, because we were really good friends for a really long time, and I am so glad you're back in my life, and words can't express, and I'm super proud of how much you've been able to improve your life, and I also understood why you were acting the way you were acting when you were young.
I mean, you gotta give yourself a break. You were young.
See that, folks? That's IRL character development.
I deeply regretted what happened when the forum got hacked. It was due to my negligence. I had gotten stressed out. I had fallen behind. I was, for the past 9 months, just not really posting on the forum. I had been called out for it. But it was during a time of great transition in my life. And I learned a lot. And I think the biggest thing that I learned is always take backups. GodSub 2.0 has, I pay for monthly backups for that, and I take them manually every 6 months just because I don't want that to ever happen again. But yeah, we're doing new and exciting things over there. And I was so glad to come back and I guess try to utilize some of my skills to help out the community that means so much to me.
I would like that.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
Yeah.
I super appreciate you. Words can't express.
I do as well. What happened in the past is the past. What matters is who you are now.
Uh-huh.
And so far, at least, you've been great. I got no complaints.
Thanks, man.
You've really kind of outdone yourself, and I never thought that was going to be what came from just me reaching out to you about old character models so I could do a cosplay. That was all. That was all I expected. It was just whatever, and then it was just oh yeah, let's all reconnect with Jessi. And for me, it's the first time, but I'm glad that you guys did.
Thanks. Yeah, I would have never guessed that Godsub would have come back either, just because if you had asked me in 2019, I would have been like, I don't have time for that. But I guess I have a work from home job now. Unfortunately, world events happened around the same time we reconnected, but a silver lining in that is I was able to take on that project, so, and I will keep doing it as long as I can.
Yeah. Okay. Alright. Would you like to go? Well, you're the only one left, Pierre.
Yeah, I guess so.
This is gonna be good.
What was I expecting? Like an evil laugh?
You sounded defeated instead.
No.
Justin's already taking my villain thunder. Already.
I wish I had some popcorn with me.
I don't even now he just laughed, that evil laugh he just did.
True villain all along.
I don't know. I'm just feeling all the like evil shit right now.
I understand. You've got to do this like every week, right? Well, my story is the beginning of it is not very interesting. The beginning is I've always quite liked a lot of Square games back in the day. I believe my first role-playing game that I ever played was Final Fantasy 1. So, I had played all the ones that had come out in America at the time. So, 4, 6, eventually 7. So, eventually I had just ended up playing... Well, I've actually told this part of the story before, where I had a decision. I was going to rent a game. I believe it was rent, not buy. And it was... I'm either going to rent one game. It's either going to be Parasite Eve or Xenogears. And that day, I chose Parasite Eve. And I have no regrets. But later on, I did play Xenogears when it was still fairly relevant, when it was still available. And, at the time, I quite liked the game. But I have to admit, even though it was quite different from the other games that I had been playing, the other role-playing games, it did kind of fall in the shuffle of all these games. I'm not sure if I have if I can pick a favorite from like the late 90s or whatever. If you had asked me later on which was your favorite, I probably would say Xenogears. If you asked me today which is my favorite from that era, I would definitely not say Xenogears. And even mine, at the time there were certain games I hadn't played yet. I had only rented Final Fantasy VIII. I had never finished it at the time. I didn't finish Final Fantasy VIII until 2009.
Oh.
Yeah, it was only a rental, so I, just ended up playing it much later. And then I played 9. I also had never played that one. I didn't even rent that one. And I ended up playing that also in 2009 for the first time. So, those games, there were quite a few games from the 90s I didn't play until, much after Xenogears. But yeah, was familiar enough with the fandom. Like, I had known about Perfect Works and all that. But I have to admit, at the time, I didn't care nearly as much as most other people did. Some people might be surprised to hear that, but at the time, I really didn't give a shit. But I had known about like the fan sites. I had posted something to you guys earlier, an old fan post from whatever that site was called. There's so many sites back then. There was like a million sites for every game, so. And Xenogears was not too different. It was never as active as the Final Fantasy stuff, but it was, it had its community. Of course, I do think since I was the last one, I will talk a little bit about just what it was like back then. Like, it was if you maybe didn't get into fandoms until like maybe the late 2000s, or even not even the late 2000s. Like a lot of people didn't until like the 2010s. Like if you're like 22. You're listening to this, so that's probably right around the time you started caring more about fandoms, probably like 2011 or something. So, yeah, like at the time Xenogears had come out, it was so different that, like it was an era where PC games and console games they were separated. If you went on a website, they were always separated. They were never, like if you went on GameSpot, Game of the Year. You had 2 different games of the year. You had console game of the year, and you had PC game of the year. Completely different culture back then. No social media really. anything. Like MySpace didn't even exist yet. It was just a different time. And you had the Google Group stuff. I posted one thing from there, and the thing I posted was from '97, because back before Xenogears had come out, and I wasn't aware of this at the time, but people, they weren't even sure if the game was going to be translated. They didn't know if Xenogears was going to make it to America. So even back then in '97, there was some discourse about the game. And Morogoro, some of you guys know who that is. I label him personally like as somewhat as a joke, but I do think there's some validness to it. I tend to label him as the first Xeno fan ever. He's the oldest Xeno fan I know. From like as far as like how long he's been a fan, he was following that game before it was ever released since '97. He's shown me a lot of old stuff that I didn't know existed. A lot of old discourse I didn't know about. In Japan, from when the game was, before the game had even come out in America, before there was any perfect works or anything like that. That was the first few months the game came out, was actually a pretty interesting time in the fandom compared to what we know from, after that time period from a Western point of view. And I will talk about that a little bit because, for those of you who don't know who Morogoro is, he's a Japanese fan. He's from Japan. And he is probably around Kat's age. I think he's a little older. He has a son in college, so if you want some perspective, his Xenogears is older than his son. So yeah, but yeah, like he, at the time, because obviously as we move on into the fandoms, I'll talk about this more once I talk about my fandom a little more. But we have to kind of talk. You can't talk about fandoms without talking about, I suppose, fandom divides and different factions of fandoms. Because Xeno doesn't have one fandom. It's always been, even when it was just Xenogears, it was a fandom divided. And I'm not just talking about the West and the East. I just mean people. It was always a strange fandom. You would think it'd only be Final Fantasy. When Final Fantasy VII came out, you already had the divide of fans that were more fans of like Final Fantasy VI, and people who were fans of Final Fantasy VII, or people who didn't like that it was like 3D now. Like to them, that's like how some people felt when it stopped being turn-based. Like that's how it was back then. People don't talk about that anymore because all games were becoming 3D at the time. You had a few exceptions, right? You had like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, that was still 2D. But for the most part, there was a divide even in just like gaming culture, and Xenogears happened to come out right around that time. So it was I think that's something in mind that people don't really talk about anymore when it comes to like the history of the fandom. But back to my, fandom. But I never engaged in a lot of the stuff you guys were talking about. I was aware of quite a bit of it, but it was never in my consciousness because I wasn't that kind of fan at the time. I never made an account in any of those forums, like Godsip or any of that. I never even heard of Godsip until I think like sometime in the early 2010s or something was when I first heard about it. I didn't even really know about it back then. So yeah, that's how like out of it I was. Like I was very hands off, and I felt no need to be anything but hands off back then. So obviously, eventually, Xenosaga comes out. I did not play it when it first came out. I played Xenosaga quite a while after it came out. And then of course, and I did like Xenosaga. I think that kind of brought me a little closer to being more like the fan I was in the early 2010s when I was really like kind of, I suppose, analyzing it in a way that most people wouldn't, because a lot of people were doing that back then. But I always thought my point of view was a little bit different, where I was interested in the themes and many of those aspects, but I was really interested also in just what are the influences we don't know about? Like who are the who's and the whats of behind the game that weren't just Takahashi, and there were other things that led me to be more interested in that over time. And I'd be surprised at how much of an influence a lot of people that are never talked about in the company were on these games. So that was always more my point of view. Also because it wasn't based on things like themes and, old philosophical writings that quite frankly, are always going to be rooted in subjectiveness. If you read Friedrich Nietzsche's writing, there's actually very little in the form of argument, and it's more almost like...
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't even say that. I would say it's more... I'm trying to find the right word for it. I would say Nietzsche's more of like a literary historian, in a way. And kind of a social commentator. I put it that way.
But just commentary in general. Yeah, the whole nature of that.
Yeah, of course, there's other aspects to it. It's ultimately it is a series of philosophy books, but it is but again, when it's hard to explain it without literally starting a conversation about him. So, but regardless, because of that and so much of the discourse around that at the time, I was more interested in something that was a little bit more objective and saying, okay, why is this part of the game like this? Why did he make this decision? Why was this decision made? So that was always I carved that niche out for myself. That was always my thing. So, yeah, Xenoblade is a thing that happens. I actually didn't finish it the first time I played it. I ended up going back to it later on. So, believe it or not, I think it was 2013 was the first time I finished Xenoblade. So, yeah, it's not like I played that game when the Japanese version came out or something, So again, it's still a pretty casual point of view, but I would say 2013 is when things started to change for me. That's when I really started to stick my nose and what is really going on here? What is this really about? What is I've always been the kind of person that separates each of these games. Like when I say Xeno, I'm very careful. I don't really call it a series. They're 3 different IPs. They're pretty different. They're different. Xenosaga and Xenogears are more like each other, but they're still different. And personally, I've always found more artistic appreciation in seeing the fact that they were different rather than what was alike about them. Of course, some people saw what was different about them and use that, to be tribalistic, I guess. But for me, I just never really cared to, if there was something I didn't like, it's actually the opposite. For me, the things I don't like is when Xeno is too much of the same, I suppose. That's always been my gripe. Yeah, it's hard to say which one, because I had replayed Xenogears quite a few times. I probably played that game about 6 times. And I'm at a point where I'm almost forgetting what the English script for that game is like, having played it more in Japanese at this point. Not so much the case with Xenosaga, because the translation is I want to say the translation of Xenogears is outright terrible. It's just certain sentences are handled in a different way. And I think of that now. With Xenosaga, the translation is much closer, and it's surprisingly more faithful. So I don't really, I don't differentiate the two as much in that regard. And then, Xenoblade X comes out. And I feel like that's the shift in the fandom for me, where I think when Xenoblade X comes out, that's the shift, the real shift, or at least the bridge between the old and the new fandom. I actually considered the original Xenoblade, when that was the only Xenoblade game, I actually still consider that a part of the old fandom. Because you still saw people from the Xenogears and Xenosaga era around that time. Even if they didn't like the game, they were still around. And it was when Xenoblade X came out, that's when I felt like a lot of the old heads weren't really as around anymore. I feel like that's the bridge between old and new. And then Xenoblade 2 was on the Switch, and of course that's a much more popular console than the Wii U. So the series got, naturally more popular. So that's I would say the fandom was already in the new era before then, but that's when it was really like the current era of the fandom was Xenoblade 2. So I'm not going to sit here and break up every single era of the fandom for you, because I've already been talking for a while, but I don't think my history of the fandom is nearly as interesting as Kat's or Jessi's, because I was never involved in it in that way. I've always kept my distance to a certain extent. So yeah, I would say, obviously I'm here. If you know who I am, you probably know, there's a certain infamy with me where Pure is that guy that, is, I suppose, maybe authoritative about information regarding the series in a way, doesn't publish that much of it, and also doesn't actually like the games anymore. And I'm pretty comfortable saying that at this point. So that's kind of that's how I'm seen. It's not necessarily inaccurate, but it's just, I would say that when that started for me was around 2016. That's when the descent into madness, if you want to call it that, began.
Welcome to therapy.
That's when I started to become more jaded, more cynical, maybe even a little bitter Xeno. And it's a little different for me, because people, they'll say, well, I'm a Xenosaga and Xenogears fan. I don't like Xenoblade. Or, I like Xenogears, I don't like the rest. Or, I like Xenosaga, but I don't like, these other games. They have their, again, they have their tribe or whatever, and there's nothing wrong with just liking your thing, and, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but, for me, it's always just been, I used to like the games, I don't like them anymore. That's kind of what it's been like. It's not tribalistic for me, it's just, that's just where I'm at now, and, I've been at that point for a very long time, and it is strange. You question, like, why are you even here, or whatever. Well, I do like these folk, and, it's nice to be here, and
Aww.
the history of the fandom is still an interesting subject for me. I think, I feel like I'm obligated to be here, I guess. I feel like it'd be maybe a little irresponsible for me to just be like, no, I'm not going to be here, or something like that. Because ultimately, I still think preserving an accurate history of how things were is important to me. I still think there's just something inside of me that sees it as important, even if I wouldn't label myself a fan anymore. And I don't necessarily hold it against someone for being a fan, so maybe they'll be able to take something from this and, understand the history of it a little more, maybe make it a better place. I don't know.
Honestly, it's a take that I personally really appreciate, and I think it's like refreshing and kind of like I think it's a good way to open maybe some people's eyes to certain things, for sure. To say something without saying much of anything.
Yeah, I feel like I've talked so much during my time in fandom, and I remember when, like, the big break for me was when I saw, or rather, from my perspective, I was an old head, and I was trying to get some of the newer fans who had only played Xenoblade 1 for the first time. I wanted to get them interested in the older games so that the community would still flourish, because by the time Xenoblade 1 was out, we were declining in membership in Godsend 1.0, so the fandom was it never died, but it was definitely diminished, and my first couple of interactions with people who I was worried were trying to keep Xenoblade fans out of older fandom spaces. I probably had a much more negative reaction than I should have, because like I like it was basically sometimes I think of the communities I've run in the past as like taverns, and I want more patrons, I want more people, I want more friends, and I saw the people who were turning away people from their communities, and I was like, are you insane? You want less people in your community? And now I'm like, yeah, I don't want to participate in any community right now. So it's been a big turnaround for me right now.
Yeah, to your point about like the declines in membership and stuff, I feel like that also coincided with like the rise of Tumblr getting really popular, Twitter, Reddit. Like people had kind of started to like pick one website and do all of their interactions on that, and be less inclined to check out a forum or even post on the forum that they were members of.
Yeah, 100%. Because like, social media made it easy for individuals to talk, and that's why it became a huge boom. But these were completely different formatted communities from anything that we had before. So, like our little gated community with forum where you had to make your own account and you had to be accountable when you were badly behaved, that kind of definitely died out.
And we weren't jaded with social media yet. It was new and fun.
Yeah. And now, like, calling people out on Twitter.com is expected. It's a pastime for people. And, like, I'm 41, I am an adult, I am overemployed, I am not interested.
The fact that you're calling it a pastime is just so insane because you're not wrong. And it's just like me realizing this is where we're at with it.
Man, remember when I used Twitter?
I was thinking about that. I was like, I don't think I remember the last time I've ever seen you tweet. It's been a minute.
Followed my new account.
I did. I made I posted a few videos, but I haven't said anything on Twitter since October.
I don't say things on Twitter. I mostly lurk.
Well, I'm sure if you remember on Twitter, random people would come to me and ask me questions, and they were usually really stupid questions, and they were always about Xeno. Even now, I don't know. I got to the point where it became like a joke, where every time somebody asked me something on Twitter, I get increasingly more mean toward them over time to see if people would notice. And I remember the last thing somebody sent me was an interview, a Japanese interview. And they were saying, let's fund this or something so that somebody can translate this. And I literally just responded. I was like tagged in that conversation for some reason. But I literally just translated what it said, the brief thing he was asking about. And I literally said something like, yeah, I'll save you a Happy Meal is what it says or something. Like I was being real mean about it.
People.
I don't know. Sometimes it used to happen on Discord. I don't know if people were getting my Discord or something. I would just respond. I remember the one time that somebody sent me something, and then they deleted their account before I could answer.
What?
Yeah, that happened once. I posted that whole screen cap on Twitter. It's so strange. I had no idea what happened. No, I'm sorry. He deleted his message, so I didn't get a chance to answer, and then he deleted his account.
Oh,
when I responded with the picture of Will Smith in the empty room from Fresh Prince, that's what I posted because I didn't know. I don't know why he did it.
Okay.
Yeah, he had posted a question to you, and then you went in to look at it and like answer, and it was just like nothing anymore, and just like Will Smith in the empty room.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just. I've had several people tell me, like, I think some people are just scared to talk to you sometimes, and I'm just like, good. I don't want these people to talk to me.
Get off my lawn.
Get off the lawn.
Yeah, it's just how it was. I don't know. It's just, it was funny sometimes. Sometimes it's just annoying because sometimes I'm just like, I have better things to do than talking about Xeno. Sometimes, like, I just, especially at that point, right? Like when I don't even like games anymore.
It's hard to be an adult in fandom.
It really is, and I'm a recovering people pleaser, so like I kind of like basically see fandom like there's the people I don't know, and there's the people who have been my friends for going on 10+ years, and I will always favor the 10+ years people, except for like under extreme circumstances. If somebody I'd been friends with for 10+ years like turns their back on me or like betrays me, like that is the bar there.
Yeah, in my experience at least, when it comes to like these kind of communities, and this is more than just fandom in general, I find that like when you join a community like that, you find the people that you mesh with, and then you take them out of that. Like you take your relationship outside of that community, and that's how you start making some connections. Like I remember back in college, we had a club. It was called the Japan Club, and it was supposed to be about Japanese culture. It was mostly about anime, and like there was so much petty nonsense going on in there, so much drama, like to the point where I didn't even want to be a part of it anymore. But there's people there that like some of the same games I did, so, I was like, well, I still want to be friends with them, but I don't want to hang out with them in that. So I ended up finding some people that I got along with, and I started hanging out with them outside of that environment. And they were a lot better to hang out with once you got them outside of that. And I think, like, with fandoms, online fandoms, you can do similar things. There's people on Twitter that I mesh with, and I try to talk to them outside of Twitter or outside of like a fandom environment. Maybe it's a DM, maybe it's we meet up IRL. Like a lot of people in XenoChat, a lot of people that I really like, I've actually met them IRL at this point. Like, I can talk to them outside of the context of fandom, and I think that's a good thing to do. And a little bit, it's also a good way to kind of see who's real, like, and who's just gonna be a jerk online.
Go touch grass.
Touching grass is fantastic.
Touching grass, like, basically saved my life, like, last year.
PSA of this episode.
Yeah, for real. But yeah, I don't know. I listen, in my experience, that's kind of the way I like to go about it when it comes to getting into a community like this. I like to find people that I like, and, you know, I try to take the conversation outside of that community.
That's valid, and I do think that is a lot of the charm in what drew people to social media, right? Because you could meet somebody in the Facebook group or on Twitter, and they would just be talking about something that you liked, but maybe that wasn't the whole, reason they were there. But I still think that I will stand up for fan communities and moderation and independence and archival. Things just tend to go on social media and go poof.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always a space for that, especially archiving stuff. You guys know me, I'm big on that. So I'm glad that they exist, that we don't that we're not going to let history get lost.
Yeah, I think it also helps to say, like, not that it's not okay to, have certain little obsessions that, make you happy and things like that. But don't be afraid to, like, get out and just explore other things.
Yeah.
Not everything necessarily is going to happen in, like, one series that you get attached to that doesn't happen in another. Of course, they all, like, have their niches and stuff, but, like, it helps to have other things to keep your mind on other than just the one thing. That goes with, like, anything, I feel like. I know for some people that might, like, be harder than with others, and I understand having, like, deep connections to a series and things like that, for sure. But it never hurts to, just, like, explore things. Like, you might find something in something you never thought you would like, that you never thought of before.
And for what it's worth, I mean, I do genuinely believe that a lot of fandom is trying to do just that. And they, like, the purpose is to bring people of similar interests together, and hopefully you guys can discuss what you guys like and maybe even discover some new things. And I like to think that even in our own little quote-unquote fandom here on XenoChat, we've done that. So I think that's valid. I think that's one of the cool things about having a community and about having fandoms. But I think in terms of just, like, interpersonal relationships, I think those could be handled a little bit better. And I think a lot of our social media platforms don't do a great job at helping people communicate. I mean, Twitter, enough said.
Yeah.
Like,
exacerbate certain things for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like the more people I met in Xeno fandom, the more I just knew who hated each other, and I was still trying to be friends with as many of these people as possible. But, like, there comes a certain point where if somebody sees you being friends with somebody else who has made you mad or disrespected you, and you trying to be neutral in that, that kind of led me to think that I was being a bad friend, and I've had to make some kind of tough choices in dropping acquaintances for, like, better friendships. And like, I think the more I've done that, the more like, I can't be friends with everybody. And when I first realized that, it broke my heart. But I was also trying to be friends with so many people, and it just got too much for me.
Man, this episode sounds more like therapy advice for fandoms.
I mean, I don't know what you intended.
I mean, in some ways, sure, I guess.
I did want to say something, actually. I noticed something. So you sent me this link, and is the episode really called Fandom with Pure? If I'm looking at that right.
Yeah.
Now it's not.
I mean,
good job. You just changed it.
It was just a placeholder title.
Yeah.
All right.
Please keep it that.
Unless you want it to be called that. I mean,
just call it Pure Fandom.
Yeah.
Pure Fandom.
And have his name in caps and bold letters.
not that we've we've established some of our fans. Man, you guys are making me so glad I never bothered talking to anybody in those early days.
Right?
And didn't really talk to that many people after. I've always just kind of been. I kind of just spoke to an audience, so to speak, like just assuming everybody was listening, and whoever listened is just what it is, and I just was like, I don't care. That's always been my approach. So, yeah. Anyway, what?
Oh, I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's okay. It's all right. What are you going to say? Because I'm about to go in a different territory.
I was just going to say that's a big contrast between sort of the old social media, or the old way where people would come together in communities. We would hold things like contests and have all of these like group activities. It was always everybody has to do everything together. To like the new way of social media, and it's interesting to just like kind of ruminate on the differences and the positives and the drawbacks of each one.
Yeah. I mean, some stuff is better now, but some stuff was definitely better back then too. It's more. I don't know. Fan interaction feels more commercialized than it used to be. I think that's the best way for me to.
100%. Like so many people like have commodified their hobbies. So many people are just like out there for clicks too, and not really caring not really caring about their demeanor so much as the amount of attention that they get.
It's like the big, it's kind of like that mentality that a lot of people who are younger that want to become like YouTubers and things to that degree, I feel like have is like, oh, I can make a living talking about the things I like. I get the appeal, but yeah, there's a lot of that just. It feels like that happens a lot lately. Not to at the risk of sounding just very old saying that, but yeah, I get it. I get why it's there, but
yeah,
doesn't make it like everybody should be that way either.
Right, yeah. And also, like, the pressure that's on a lot of these people who garner a lot of attention is, like, the judgment a lot of people, like, bring down on them. Because you have so many viewers, you have to never make any mistakes or have any bad judgments. Otherwise, you invite, like, a lot of, like, really searing hot criticism.
Yeah, and another aspect of it, Kai, you mentioned the whole commercialization of fandom, and another thing that's interesting about that to me is there's also the overconsumption aspect of it too, where an interesting trend I've noticed on social media is when people join fandoms or communities, folks have this need to get up to speed on everything they can possibly get their hands on for a particular piece of media or series, and try to consume that as fast as they can so they can participate in whatever discussion's happening that week. And it's like it's just such a weird thing where, like, let's say a new game will come out in a franchise, and then people are like in a rush to track down like 30 years of media for that specific franchise and try to consume all of it before that game comes out in like a couple months or something like that. Like, I've mentioned this in other discussions about like Metroid when Dread was coming out. I used to see people making these elaborate guides on everything you quote unquote need to do or play or read in order to understand Metroid Dread that's coming out later this year. And it's like, and I remember seeing that, like, people would make these guys and they would post it on Twitter, they would get like hundreds of likes and retweets, and I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, you guys are really encouraging people to seek out 30 years of media and consume 30 years of media in like a month or two just so they can quote unquote understand this one game coming out.
Oh no! See, Justin, it was a meta explanation. See, this is what the fandom is like. So watch out what you're getting into. Is what they were trying to say all along.
Try to imagine doing that with something like pro wrestling. You better. I hope you're ready.
Oh my
to
goodness!
Go back to the 1800s when it was in the carnivals, bro.
Yeah.
I hope you're ready to. Better watch those old territory tapes. You better find them.
You got to know the history to understand how we've gotten to this point.
Yeah, it's just like it's just this really interesting trend I've seen with people. Like that kind of, I guess that kind of goes into like binge culture as well, which is a whole other tangent. But it's just it's an interesting phenomenon I've seen with like a lot of fandoms. And there's just this weird inherent pressure that gets put on newcomers to do that in order to feel like they're up to task and that they can actually engage with the community. And I'm not sure if that's the healthiest thing.
Yeah, it's very unfair to expect a newcomer to a fandom to have absorbed every bit of history there is. It's just not possible.
That's like the that one post I made on Twitter jokingly, where I posted a tweet saying, "Oh, you're a Xeno fan? Name every staff member, including the uncredited ones, by memory."
Even I don't know that.
Yeah. Anyway, I did kind of want to go back a little bit to the really early days of the fandom and what it was like.
Yeah.
More from, I'm cheating here because.
Oh well, we can't do that.
I'm cheating because a lot of this information is from Arigoto, and obviously I'm not a fan from Japan. I've been there, but I've not, and I've talked to a lot of Japanese fans, but Arigoto is the only one that I really know that's been around for that long, like, to have, had followed it since long before it came out, and has stuck with it to this day. So, it's interesting that, and this is something I don't see too many people talk about. I was thinking about, and when I was talking to him, I was thinking about what would be the first divide in the history of the Xeno fandom? What was the first time you had people in different camps? Because you had that in the West, but later on, you had that in like 2000. You had, the different posters on the different forums. You didn't always like to hang out with all the people on the other forums, they were almost like different communities sometimes. I'm sure you guys at least have some recollection of that. Okay, so Morigato was thinking, to something he had told me, back in the day when we were, we were first becoming friends long ago, and it was probably, and it's funny because this reason for a divide is at least a little bit more rooted in something, I guess, less stupid, but still kind of stupid to divide yourself this much over it. It was in the Japanese fandom. It was not, because the game had not come out in America yet. So this was in like maybe 3 or 4 months after the game came out. You had some people that were really obsessed with the game, like how people tend to be when a new game comes out. And Xenogears is no stranger to attracting some incredibly obsessive people. And the first thing was, people of course noticed pretty fast that the game references many things to the writings of Friedrich Nietzsche and Carl Jung and Freud, Lacan. I don't know if that's how you say his name. I've always just read as Lacan in my head, or Lacan, but whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think it's Lacan or something. It doesn't sound right when I read it that way in my head, though. It's never. I don't know. I've never talked to someone about him in my life outside of like one instance, and I don't think they were saying his name right. Like when I was in college, and that was like it. So people notice these things, but the divide was, I suppose, agreeing on what elements of the game were using that as an inspiration or referencing it or retelling it in some way. And then there was another divide where people were debating over whether the usage of this was accurate in any way. My first thought is always, Takahashi likes to use this stuff way too literally. That's always been my thing. Don't think that's necessarily an inherently bad thing, but there is some thought to say that I had never read Nietzsche or Jung until I was until like the mid 2000s. So when I played Xenogears, I didn't really know much about this stuff other than like osmosis, and really it still wasn't that much because I just didn't give a shit. It was the 90s. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I don't care about what fucking turtle recurrence or whatever. I want to know what's going on with Kurt Cobain or whatever. There was just some thought of whether or not this was accurate. If you want my take on it, if you want my theory on whether what the relation between Xeno and this stuff, which obviously there is one, very much so, is that I have a theory that Takahashi has never actually read most of Nietzsche's books and has actually just read like a highlight reel of it in some way.
I believe
because
he spark noted it,
something like that. I mean, I might be saying that in a way that's a little harsh.
No,
but the reason why I say that is just, it's something that Margot said that was it's something I noticed subconsciously but never really thought about. This might be a little controversial, but I'm sure I'll stay in the most tasteful way possible. Also, I've heard this said before. I've heard it. The way the Western fandom talks about this subject is very different from how a Japanese fandom would talk about it. The way they talk about it is very different things regarding Xenogears, and it's that obviously Nisha has wrote some stuff that's a little weird. He's wrote some stuff, especially if you read it without context. If you just open up a page in Beyond Good and Evil, you're going to see some stuff that's going to be, something an incel would write. Put it that way. He's wrote some pretty weird shit, and of course, that stuff is weird. Like, there's no it's if you define that stuff as misogynistic, that's not inaccurate. What people don't necessarily get sometimes is that Nisha himself wants you to call that writing misogynistic. I think that's something that kind of goes over some people's heads because of what he writes before those entries. What he writes there is like he's like exposing the ugliest part of his bias to you when he writes that. Beyond Good and Evil is a very weird book. And in his, I believe it's his last book that was ever published, he actually kind of makes fun of himself for the way he writes that stuff and handles it. At least to a certain extent. But with the divide here is, and this is just an example. There's plenty of examples. I think this is just the easiest one to cite as far as like Nisha's writing because it's so infamous. Everybody, when you bring up Nisha in a controversial way, that's what's going to get brought up every time, and probably rightfully so. The idea was that some of the stuff he wrote was not meant to. It was meant to be challenged, and some people felt that Takahashi was putting some of the inspirations from some of the stuff he wrote in his game, but not in a way where it was meant to be challenged. Like, you're just supposed to accept it at face value. And
missing the context, yeah.
Right. People feel that maybe that's why I say maybe he's never read the books in their entirety.
Hey, Pure, is there an example of this in any of the Xeno games?
In what way? What do you mean?
I was thinking just the general rule of cool of all of it kind of like factored in some way.
I mean, it was at the time putting that stuff in your games was actually more trending than people realized. It's just that most people weren't naming their stuff. Like, they weren't calling stuff, id or whatever. That was literally the name of the thing. Takahashi went in that direction. I would say if you want an example, I guess, if I'm understanding your question, and I'm going to put this, because this divide was more in the Japanese fandom, because that was very trendy in Japan at the time. That kind of influence was in a lot of anime at the time. It was something like, I was talking about some of the stuff that Nisha had put in Beyond Good and Evil. So people were saying, well, there's like, maybe the way Takahashi had treated, and this is the way they would word it, would be like the way he treated some of his heroines felt like he was reading Nisha's stuff the wrong way, and that he was putting on an image of challenging the status quo, but maybe didn't really challenge the status quo when it came to certain characters and how they were handled, like Ellie or something. Stuff like that. again, the Western fandom would not word that in that way. I think they'd be more aggressive about it. Again, it's also important to realize that like that book was also written in a different language, and when read in a certain language, it does have a different tone to it. But ultimately, it is still he writes some weird shit in there. Like there's no going around it. Even in like 1800s Germany, some people
that and the time period. I was like it's also very old.
Yeah, and even at that, even in the time period, people thought that was kind of weird, and then they realized that like you guys do know that he was hanging out with a lot of like female philosophers, right? Like that was like his thing. Never got any goddamn girlfriends though, because he was a. I don't want to be too mean, but some people there was a thing where people were asking who's the biggest loser in philosophy, and some people named him. And I don't think that's the right answer. I think the best answer is something someone else wrote saying it's probably some Greek philosopher you don't know about that had his tablet smashed by a knight or some shit that never had him read or something.
Yeah, didn't his Nazi sister kind of edit some of his books to be not so great?
Yeah. Yeah, but those examples I'm naming are in the original.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's some of that stuff that was edited is most people are aware that's not. I definitely don't think Takashi's getting his inspiration from that.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I don't. No. We're not going in that direction.
Okay, good. Sorry.
No. Don't get me wrong. I hate Xeno, but I'm not gonna bullshit you and be like, yeah, man, it was going in with that stuff. No. Utic was the good guy. That's what he was trying to. Yeah, like that's not what he was trying to say.
I feel like a lot of insofar as the niche stuff, and insofar as the Xeno games that I play, I feel like the message is mostly like in self-determination more than anything.
Yes, I just think that's true. I'm not. I think an example of that maybe of him missing the point, if that was the inspiration. What I also think is that's their argument. That's not even mine. Right? Mine would be, I think Takahashi maybe has some aspects, depending on how you interpret the subject that I mentioned about, how the heroines and Xenogears are handled or whatever. Of course, everyone's going to have a different interpretation of that. But for me, I just think that because of the subjects he was tackling, and he did want Xenogears to come off as something that was challenging the status quo, I do think that in doing so, he did kind of maybe, again, depending on your interpretation of it, exposed maybe some, I guess, less than flattering, old-fashioned social biases in at least with Xenogears. I think it's in all his games, but we're talking about Xenogears first. So I do think that's an aspect to it. I just don't know for sure if that was inspired by Nisha specifically. I think there are things that were inspired by Nisha that I think don't work out. I just don't know if that was really one of them. I think if there was something that was inspired was there's the concept of the eternal feminine that Takashi seems kind of really into. That ironically Nisha does talk about. I don't think, again, I have a feeling he's not aware of what Nisha had said about it. Nisha was actually very mixed on the concept. He thought it was kind of, again, maybe old-fashioned, and that's in the 1800s, by the way, so...
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like, if that was the case, yeah.
But keep in mind, he was very ahead of his time back then. So, like, the stuff he wrote shapes the foundation of what a lot of philosophers and psychologists would write in the first half of the 20th century. So, keep that in mind. Like Carl Jung, like, Nisha lives rent-free in his head. Like, hard. Like, he's kind of... A lot of his work is so heavily motivated by what he read from Nisha.
And Japanese culture in general.
Some could say that was the very first split in the Xeno fandom.
It's like a lot of Jungian philosophy, from what I've heard about it and read about it, because I can't say for sure, because like I've not actually read his works, I guess, but I've looked. I've seen things that talk about his stuff that kind of like go into like a lot of the ideas that Jung came up with, like are somewhat based in, like Eastern religions and culture and things like that in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the Jungian stuff, I think it's hard to define in the same way because it's not. It's more. It's even more like nebulous his writings in many ways.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, especially considering what kind of stuff he tends to tackle from what I've seen, but...
Right, and it's also subject to misinterpretation. I don't know if he misinterpreted certain things about it, Takahashi, like the collective unconscious in Xenosaga is a pretty literal version of Jung's collective unconscious, which people often mistake as actually being like Takahashi's version, where it's like this literal thing. That's not quite what it's supposed to be, but again, there are many aspects of it that are quite nebulous. There's also eternal recurrence, which is also incredibly literal in Xenosaga. But the thing about eternal recurrence is that Nisha had given it that label, but he's not really the first person to come up with that. Like that concept has been tackled before him. He's just the one that made it more famous. You know, I believe the original idea before he had really written about it was that eventually in this world, another person will be born with the exact same sensibilities and thought process as myself. Not like a literal reincarnation, but that kind of thing. Whether it be coincidence or not has never actually been clear to me, if that's what they meant by that. But I think Nisha took it in a less, perhaps, in an interpretation that is perhaps less susceptible to being interpreted as supernatural, I suppose, like some people did. Of course, Takahashi took that and was like, okay, we're going to name this character after Nisha's middle name, and he's going to be responsible for eternal recurrence, where the world is literally going through eternal recurrence over and over again. Like I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think,
that feels like a lot of rule of cool to me, which I'm fine with because I love stupid.
I think there's some substance to the way he handled it in that regard. I just think it's not entirely related to Nisha as much as I originally perhaps believed once I became more familiar with the original subject. But again, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing. But again, you hear this subject that I'm talking about, you could see why in the 90s, where this was more popular in Japan, why some people would be arguing about this. And now you have these camps of like, well, Xenogears sucks because I finished it and it would have been better if it maybe didn't do this, perhaps using this inspiration in a way that maybe wasn't entirely on the money or something. Like the people were being, people bitch about everything. And Japan is no different, trust me. Fandoms over there are not that different from the West. Not as different as some people would like to have you believe. But at the very least, it's a lot more interesting of a thing to be divided about than, this Xenoblade stuff is too different from Xenosaga, and I don't like that people are lumping it in, or that it's called Xeno. Like, that's like, you hear that, and it sounds a lot more juvenile than what people were arguing about at the time. And even then, I don't think people should have been divided over that. I think it's an interesting discussion, I guess.
To be genuinely divided is petty. I will say debates like that are interesting, lively. I always welcome them in the community as long as they remain civil. I have no issue with people debating the philosophy of the game. That's half the fun of liking a game that's so weird like Xenogears or Xenosaga.
I think my least favorite interaction on the Xeno Underground fandom was I was trying to make a space for people who enjoyed Xenoblade to talk, and this one user was replying on each of my posts in this section with, "I don't like Xenoblade," and I was like, bro, please. Not every section is the debate section.
Some of the stuff's petty and sucks.
The thing is that, when that was happening, I wasn't, upset that people were, divided over that. I was just thinking, I don't know, I don't know why people were so, people, it was different, the influences are different, right? They often think they'll be labeled as it seems more inspired by shonen. By the way, Xeno was always very inspired by shonen, it just masked it a lot better. But it did have less of the philosophical themes in some ways, but for me, it was just, I don't give a shit. I just didn't care. I just didn't give a shit that was, I was like, bro,
Yeah, for me, I would not ever say upset so much as just, it's annoying.
I just didn't understand, the extent of, the anger at play. I guess because I just wasn't as much of, I'm not as attached to these games being, I think that the idea was that these are the best stories ever in any video game, and people were very attached to that. idea. So for me, I was never really attached to that. Because guess what? I've never played every video game ever made, so I can't tell you what, the best game story or best gameplay or whatever. I can't tell you that. I'm going to have my own opinion on it when I play it, so I just never cared. To me, I don't like to think about what's better than the other. Everything's just its own thing. Sure, some things have more merit than others, but I guess for me, I just was always more, I don't know, I never felt like, overly upset about it. I wasn't even that upset about the divide either, though. Like there's a part of me that empathized with people that were maybe annoyed that, like, this is so different. Why is it labeled like this? Or why are these fans pretending that it's more alike than it actually is? I actually did empathize with that to a certain extent. I actually understood where they were coming from. It's just, I don't know. I just feel like the level of, like, tribalism was like, it was really cringe even back then. Like, I never, again, I was very detached from everything, so maybe it's easy for me to say that.
Why are you going to talk bad about Satoru Iwata like that? I'm just kidding.
What'd he do?
In the interview where he suggested them rename it to, like, Xeno.
That never happened, though. That's actually a myth. That's
Is that really? I was like, I just remember people, like, referencing the Iwata aspect.
Yeah, and it's in the Wikipedia page, actually, but it's not true.
That, like, alluded.
I didn't think that was true.
No,
I wasn't sure if it was or not. I'd actually not looked into it in forever. I just remember a lot of people still to this day will reference it.
In Iwata's report, he says that he's the one that writes out that the game was renamed to Takahashi or whatever, but he never actually says that it was that he was the one that did it. In the English one, it might be a little bit more implied in the way it's written, but in the actual Japanese writing that he did, never really implied.
I'm guessing it must have been because that like whole thing around that seemed to kind of spread like wildfire.
Yeah, it's still
he was the one who suggested it, and I was like, I mean, like now in hindsight, especially like seeing where the series has gone. I mean, and I'm not saying that, like, this was all planned out from the start. Of course it wasn't. But it's just like, well, I feel like I know the way Takahashi stuff works a little more to the degree where it's like he probably would have gone that way anyway.
Oh, by the way, before somebody yells at me because I said something, I think I made a mistake earlier. I mentioned when I was talking about Carl Jung, I mentioned literal interpretations of things, and I mentioned like id and stuff, and I'm pretty sure the id stuff, I'm pretty sure that's Freud and not Carl Jung, but whatever. I have to admit,
it's Freud. It's Freud.
Yeah. Between the three of them, him, Jung, and Nietzsche, Freud he's the one that I care the least about, to be honest. So, yeah, sorry guys, sorry if you heard that and you went to go type furiously in my Twitter I don't use anymore.
I mean, I feel like if you
get a keyboard smash ready.
Freud that hard, you've probably never actually even taken a philosophy class because almost like 99% of the things that he came up with were pretty much determined all bullshit. That's
a bit of that's not entirely. It does a portion.
I mean, there's a foundational thing there, but I'm just saying, like,
very important portion of his information is basically debunked today. A lot of other stuff he wrote is not. It's just that there was Jung and Freud were friends, good friends, and they eventually came to fucking hate each other, and it's because Freud really wanted to he wanted to approach his stuff in the way we approach stuff now, where you put it out there so it can be studied further and aspects of it can be debunked, and Jung was more vague, can't be disproven, little more high concept stuff that's a little like, it's more nebulous. You can't really disprove Jung. You either think it has value or it doesn't. With Freud, it's different. He put it out there in a way where it could be debunked one day or improved upon, and you never wanted to do that approach, and they just never, it was like a boy band breakup.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why people kind of roast him now, but I mean, I think he kind of expected that to happen after his death.
So is this like a common topic in the fandom?
Only not really. I don't think people have ever talked about Xeno in the way that I just did just now, and that is me being kind of a dick when I say that, because that is me calling the fandom stupid.
Yeah, you're special, too. You're special.
Okay.
No, but in Japan, when the game first came out, these subjects were more popular because they were in a lot of anime at the time. It was trendy, so people would debate if this was accurate or not. I'm trying to bring this up in a very objective way.
Yeah.
Best as I can.
I'm just.
What was going on?
This out, you know.
But people back then, that was a thing, and it caused a divide because people back then, it was a cool thing to talk about, and people don't understand that was popular back then. Those types of that's why JRPGs they felt, people talk about JRPGs in the 90s were so much smarter or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah, well, you play, you grow up and you play Mario or, the kid games that you play.
Right,
and you hold something like a JRPG in your hand. And, I understand now at, 31 years old, Xenosaga is, not that deep. However, at that time, it felt special. And it felt special to share that with people and, talk about those things and discover those topics. I think that was very important.
Right.
I mean, if nothing got you thinking about it, right?
So. Right. But I'm just saying, back then, especially in Japan, early on, according to Morogoto, that was the first divide.
Wow.
That was the first 4 months. He gave me the whole laydown of this is exactly what it was like if you want to look at people that were divided over anything. It was this kind of stuff, and it wasn't that common. But it was the game wasn't super popular anyway at the time. So that's just we're talking about the first divide that we kind of determined. That's where people were, we really went downhill from being, questioning what was Nietzsche really trying to say, that this might not be the way it is when Takahashi tried to do this thing, to, my wife who's got bigger titties than yours or some shit. That's where we're at now. So we've really fallen from there.
Xenoblade is too anime now.
True, it was never anime, bro. Xenogears was never.
Always has been.
Of course, you move on more and more, and your divide in the fandom would be more maybe people that value certain things in the game that others don't. You got divides with shipping. You've got divides with our peers. You've got divides with websites. That's how it. That's normal though. That's a normal part of the divide. And then they start. They formed a new company. Monolith Soft is formed. People are speculating the new game, is it going to be a Xenogears sequel? It belongs to Square. Xenosaga gets announced. It's not fucking Xenogears, but it's kind of like Xenogears. It's based on a lot of concepts from Xenogears, but it's also different, and it's a different IP, and there's characters that look like Xenogears in the game, and you got all these people screaming about, this is supposed to be this character, and this is a pre-incarnation of this thing, and they're saying this matter-of-factly, and people they want to kill each other, and it's just, it's a very interesting way to divide your fandom, because at the time, there weren't that many things like that. Before, it was just, I think Final Fantasy VI is better than 7. I think 7's overrated or some shit. That was the extent of it, really. You had other stuff, right? You had the weird exceptions where, this thing happened in this fandom. But it usually wasn't about the games in that regard. It was just a controversy about, weird people or something. People were complaining about, you had these two different IPs, but they were kind of seen as, a single meta series or whatever. Even if you were the kind of person that you're look, I don't think that this should have anything to do with the other, you're still going to see it that way, because that's just how it is. The fandoms were too intertwined. So, you had a lot of divides at that point, and you had even more websites. And then you had Xenosaga fans that were probably divided from each other. And then Xenosaga 2 came out. And then you have even more divided people, because people didn't like that game. They're this series is done, it's ruined. And then you've had people that are it's fine, I liked it, or whatever. I want to see what they do next. It was a mess. The Xenosaga era was a mess, okay? There were less games back then, but it was still a goddamn mess of fandom back then. Trust me, I didn't even play Xenosaga yet. And I feel like that contributed a little bit to me not playing them. Just seeing the train wreck of discussions regarding these games, I was like, all right, I'm gonna play. Whatever the fuck I was playing at the time. I was playing a lot of PC games. I was playing a lot of PC games back then. I was a PC gamer in the mid 2000s, so I missed out on a lot of PS2 games. But I'm telling you, it was a mess. I think you guys, you've already told the stories, your personal stories. I don't need to talk about the Xenosaga era that much. because you guys have kind of, I feel like that's the bulk of a lot of your fandoms, like Tyler, Kat, Jessi. You guys were in the trenches. So I feel sorry for you guys. You guys are veterans. You guys have, like, veteran benefits or something.
Even in, like, 2009, people were still, like, preening over Xenogears as the superior, smarter game. Xenosaga's just robot titties.
Yes. And, you know, like, in my lurking, I do remember that. And I still kind of see it today, too. Like, people who... Yeah, but I mean, when I say kind of, I mean, like, I even see it outside of Xeno specifically.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Like
I've seen Gears. People will use Gears as a way to just, like, put down other RPGs.
Yeah.
And, like, be like, oh, no, RPGs, they don't make them like they used to. Xenogears is so smart, guys. Remember how great this was back in the day? Games like that don't get made anymore. Nothing Squaresoft has ever made has come close to Xenogears. None of this other crap. Shin Megami Tensei, that's child's play. Bro, play Xenogears. Only good RPG. Like, I've seen stuff like that, and I'm like, it's cringe, bro.
Yeah, I think I know people who, like, are all across the American style divides. I know people who played Xenogears all the way and were religious and were offended. I'm still friends with some people who only like Gears. The bulk of my friends are either early Xenoblade or Xenogears and Xenosaga and Xenoblade 1 people, and, like, after that, I have not keep up with the rest of the divides. Like, I think at one point, I was intimidated into breaking up and making an account for each Xeno game with, like, the subsection, because, like, I was very easily influenced, and one of the artists that I admired really loved Xenoblade X but hated the concept of Xenoblade 2, so I was like, oh, I better break up all of my art blogs so that, like, it's okay for people to interact with. But that was a really bad idea, and I am embarrassed that I even did it, and I don't know why I'm even talking about it now.
You have to have a high IQ to understand Xenogears.
It's the Rick and Morty of RPGs.
Okay.
You
The
know,
only game that ever made me feel actually stupid was probably Baba Is You, so take that with a grain of salt.
you know what? You know what? This is gonna be weird. You know what those games remind me of a little bit, and I don't mean this. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not being in this and better. Remember, guys, I used to be a fan of these games. Okay, I was thinking this before.
I can't wait.
I was thinking about this before I stopped being a fan of Takahashi's games. Okay, but it reminds you guys ever see or hear of the movie Southland Tales?
I think that sounds familiar.
The silence right there was
Wait.
Nobody saw it.
Wait, I think is that the one where it has the car? No.
A lot of movies have cars.
I mean,
that sounds like the kind of movie that Tyler might have seen, but it would have felt like a fever dream or something. It was like,
the movie feels like a fever dream. The movie is so the movie is broken up into 3 parts, and I want to say 3 parts. It's still one movie, and the parts are part 4, 5, and 6. There's no 1 to 3. 1 to 3 are like the bag. Well, that already sounds familiar, I'm sure. And it's a very political movie. It's very like dystopian or whatever. Very political. The lead character is actually played by Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah, that's the movie I'm thinking of.
Okay, so all right, yeah, playing a very different role, by the way. Today he plays like the same character over and over, but that's actually a very different character he played. But the movie was, it had like 3 books that came out right when it came out too. It's like this big thing. It's like a fucking labyrinth to try to figure out.
Oh god,
that's what Xenosaga and Xenogears remind me of every now and then. Just because I think Southland Tales is way more confusing than any of that stuff, though. Like Southland Tales, if you watch it from start to finish a couple times, you're still gonna be like, this makes no sense unless you like read this book, and even then, it's still weird. It's like a weird psychedelic thing. Honestly, not a great movie. Not well. It's put together with more duct tape than like disc 2. Okay, like it's really bizarre. But it kind of reminds me of that in the sense that it's like it was going to be 9 parts, and 7, 8, 9 never it got cut or whatever, and it just kind of always reminded me of that a little bit, like in hindsight. It's very it's a mess when I'm saying it's more messy than those games when I don't even like them anymore. But yeah,
and that sounds like my kind of thing. I'm all down for a good psychedelic train wreck.
Yeah, man. Again, watch it and then get upset at me for giving you the idea of wandering.
If I hate that much, I'll just quit while I'm ahead.
I only remember one scene from that movie, and I won't say that on the recording.
Okay, yeah, it had for those of you who don't know, it had Dwayne Johnson when he still looked like The Rock, when he didn't go into superhero look mode. He still kind of looked like he did when he was a wrestler. It had Justin Timberlake for some reason. He was casted in that role. It was very weird. I had some other people. Let me get the description here. I think the Rotten Tomatoes description is one of the funniest things of all time. Like, I'm just gonna get it real quick for you guys. Let's see. Let's get this up here. I'm trying to. No, I can't find like the really funny one that I found. I wasn't trying to be funny. It just was funny. Oh well. So. Yeah, now that I only loosely went into the Xenosaga stuff, but it's just there's so much at this point. It's hard to. I want to get into everything. I'm sure you guys can remember. If you guys have any, nice stories, would be a nice, nice change from you guys. But even another horror story of when you're on LiveJournal or something, I guess that'd be funny from the Xenosaga.
I will say that I met my best friend in this fandom that I'm still best friends with. So, Aaron, if you're out there, I love you.
Aw, we love you too, Aaron.
Really glad we met. So,
I think we had like a lot of great like contests and RPs, and had just a lot of fun. It's easy to dwell on the negative stuff. We did have a lot of fun. We made a lot of cool things.
I learned a lot of cool stuff.
We did.
I learned more about back-end websites working with you on Godsib 1.0 than I have ever learned about outside of like amateur website stuff.
I mean, I'm biased, but like I have like dominoes to a career through doing all of that, so I have no regrets.
Yeah, and I remember doing competitions, like making banners and stuff, and learning the ins and outs of, well, still not like a Photoshop expert, but I stepped my toes into that and like Paint.net and other not quite fandom stuff, but like stepped my toe into like Renpai and stuff for fan projects to make visual novels and stuff, and I branched that out, and I have learned a lot, and also I wouldn't know some of y'all either without fandoms either, so it's some good stuff.
I'm like sitting here thinking, what the hell have I learned from this?
You're on a podcast. You learned how to podcast.
Well, I actually had a podcast before this, but that's another story. Shout out to that Rainfall podcast we used to do back in the day. Yeah, so like, I mean, I guess all right. Snark aside, I can say that playing Xeno did end up, leading to me getting into Rainfall, and then I got into writing about video games and interviewing people and going out to events. So I did a lot of stuff through there. So that's pretty cool. And learning how to use Discord's a big one. I would not know how to use Discord for XenoChat. So there's good stuff about fandom. Like, I will never say that fandom can't bring good things. Despite everything I've had to say about it this episode, I will say there are good things to come from fandom.
Yeah, Justin, you're so old, you don't know how to use a computer properly. I'm sure Discord would have been, like, horrible to figure out.
Yeah, it's just absolutely the worst. If it wasn't for Xeno, I wouldn't have learned Discord, guys.
And in this era of, like, late-stage social media decay, I think that there's just a lot of value and charm for people coming together over a specific thing. We're here to talk about Xenosaga and Xenoblade and Xenogears. We're not going to talk about, like, the things that divide us that actually matter, or, like, the things that, make us angry that actually matter. Even if Xenosaga makes us angry sometimes, it's just Xenosaga, and we can have those debates in a friendly way, and we can, share the things that we love in fandom. So much great art and work and translations and scans and, like, just internet history and culture has just been lost to the decimation and degradation that has gone on through these companies.
Yeah.
So, I did find that I found the great description for the movie. And
Okay.
I'm just gonna read it.
All right.
We meet famous actor Boxer Santaros, who wakes up in Hermosa Beach with a case of amnesia, a porn star lover, and a movie script he's written entitled The Power, which uncannily imitates and predicts the events in the present and foretells the end of the world in 3 days.
That sounded like something ChatGPT generated.
Well, actually, you mentioned Operation Rainfall. As we move on to Xenoblade 1, what was that like, since you were a part of that?
So, yeah, the Rainfall campaigns, that was definitely interesting because, that came out at a time where, at least from my recollection, Nintendo announced Monado at the E3, and a lot of us saw it. We thought it looked kind of interesting. I'll be honest, when I first saw it, I personally didn't give two shits about it. And it wouldn't be till later on that I saw an article from Silicon Era that was like, actually, you're going to call it Xenoblade. And I think it was Silicon Era. It was some site. And then that's when I started paying attention. I was like, wait a second. I like Gears. I like Saga. I'm going to start paying attention to this. And yeah, like the campaign was going on, and there's a lot of like promoting the game, introducing it to people who had never heard of it. And it was cool because it felt like we reached a lot of people, and it just spread a lot of awareness for the game. And eventually, when the game came out, it was like a big deal. It was like, holy crap, this game actually is coming out. Nintendo of America are actually deciding to bring the game over. And it's like weird because I know in retrospect, it's kind of funny to think that like Nintendo of America actually even gave the game a chance to begin with, considering like so many people had given up on the Wii by that point. Like people just were not around for any of the Wii's good games. You don't know how many times I've gotten into arguments with people about like the Wii actually having decent games. A lot of people I know were like refused to play anything on the Wii.
Like they all had one. I don't know why they wouldn't.
That was just it. Like everybody had a Wii, and people just refused to play any games on it. Like it wasn't even uncommon to walk into someone's house and to see a Wii, and there'd be like 3 games. It'd be like Wii Fit, Mario Kart Wii, and then maybe like Smash, or like I guess like Twilight Princess if you're lucky.
People
like, nobody
joke
cared.
about the Wii U gathering dust, but I mean,
yeah,
the games it actually probably had more people playing them than the Wii U did. Apparently,
yeah, like. You probably could make a case about the Wii U having a bigger attach rate than just like the regular Wii because people just did not care to play the Wii at the time. And you got Xenoblade, an RPG, which that era RPGs were kind of fighting an uphill battle at that time, which is a whole other conversation in and of itself. So, the fact that we were getting this game and it looked as impressive as it did at the time was kind of a huge deal. It was really cool. And what I really liked about the community at the time with this game was that people were really cool about not spoiling it, at least in my experience. Like there was the whole 7 thing.
Yeah, I was about to say people still use 7.
Yeah, people were actually really good about that.
Except there was one time I'm just bitter. There was just one time I said I defeated a level 70 fish, and spoiler alert, someone replied, "Yeah, I just got done killing level 70 Dixon," or something like that. I'm like,
oh man.
But I'm at the beginning of the game. What are you talking about? Anyway, for the most part, from what I remember, the early days of Xenoblade, like Operation Rainfall days, it was mostly positive because everyone wanted to play the games.
Exactly.
Or the game.
Save the game?
Wait a minute, are you serious?
Yeah.
Hold on, guys. I can hear. I opened up the link. I hear two voices.
Okay, let's go over to it. Yeah, we'll quit out of Discord.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. I look. I'm ancient. I don't know what this is.
It's okay.
You know, I'm 81. I don't know. I turned 81 this year. I don't know anything about this Zencaster stuff, okay?
See, look what I can do!
But
are we recording with this thing? I don't know how this works. I don't know what this Zen thing is.
It means you don't have to do anything, because, OBS is recording all sounds from our computers.
Exactly.
So if I play a soundboard, will you hear it?
If we hear it in this call, yes.
Yeah, Tyler, is it true?
Yes.
Unless there is an option in Discord to turn that soundboard off, actually.
I think Pierre wants to play a sound. Okay, let's slow down.
If you have seen the pilot of Omega Res Novae, please contact security immediately.
By the way, Tyler, I think you're breathing at the mic just a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, it was
podcast. No, I'm kidding.
It was.
Watch me, Chief.
We can do a test before we start.
Damn, that was good can ASMR.
Yeah,
I probably should have saved that for my intro, but I've done that twice already, so.
Come on, I did on the podcast first.
I forgot.
No, I think you did.
Yeah, your first episode, I think.
Yeah, it was the very first episode, first guest episode.
Mm-hmm.
Should have brought the rum bottle back in here and pulled that cork out. There you go.
Please switch to disc 2.